So that was another 20 minutes, you know. Okay, so today we're going to review the group section of for the NCE. I don't think I can share my screen. So just bear with me if you're watching. If not, okay. So I can't figure out how to share my screen. I'm not going to waste any time with that right now. So we're going to go and I'll read the questions, and this is just what I do. Okay, I'm going to read the questions, and and then we'll discuss why the question was the way it was. Right. So just basic multiple choice. Right. The first thing to do is knock out, the ones can't be right, and generally that's going to leave you with 2, but sometimes that'll leave you with all of them. Right. Just general. Remember when you're taking it, right, to kind of pay attention to the questions and stuff, because the question can sometimes be an answer somewhere else, right? That's just something to keep in mind. The night before, you really just need to do whatever works best for you. But be sure that you get good sleep. That's one thing, right? Because you're going to be nervous anyway. Everybody's going to be nervous when they go to take a test like this. So try to get as much of that as you can, right? So whatever helps you sleep, right? If it's a bath, a bubble bath, or whatever. And kind of as you're going, you may just take notes of the things that you really feel like you need to really hone in on, and just try only to do those that night, right? The chapter 12 in that book, either book, where we're looking at it, has a review in the purple book. So that could be something that you just did that last night. Okay, so here we go. Prior to the 1960s, most counseling took place. Okay, so I know you can see the answer, but so before 1960, most counseling took place in a group setting, or B, with the entire family present, C, in a dyadic relationship, or D, in a behavior therapy clinics. Okay, so right off the top, you can knock out B and D, because families, the entire family being present, that didn't start until way later, right? If a marriage and family standpoint, in a group setting, and what is behavior therapy clinics? I don't even know what that means. Okay, so it can't be that.
Right.
I mean, nobody's ever called them that, so that can't be right. So, and B can't be right. So the choice really is, before the 60s, did most counseling take place in groups or in dyadic? And what does dyadic mean? Dyadic means 1 and 2. You and one other person. Okay. And that's the answer. Right? Because sometimes in his explanations, he'll give you good information. Sometimes he won't.
Right.
But nobody thought about having a group together to provide therapy until the 60s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And counter groups, if y'all are too young for any of that. But that was a big deal in the 70s, where people got together and did, sessions and things like that. Okay, so now we're going to be defining a group. So a group has A, a membership which can be defined, B, some degree of unity and interaction, C, a shared purpose, or D, all of the above. Now, all of the above is probably not ever going to be right. Okay? And if it's right, it'll be obvious. Okay? And that would be because so if we look at this one, we're going to say D's probably not right. But A is a membership which can be defined. Okay, is that what you are aware of as far as a group getting together? Yeah, they're going to have a membership that's defined, right? Some degree of unity and interaction, right? Remember your theories enough to know, yeah, that's right. So already there's 2. So therefore, D becomes more likely. And does it have a shared purpose? Absolutely, right? So even though usually all of the above is not, in this one it was right. But you see how, if you read through them, it's obvious that it must be, because 2 are right? Put the choices together and you have a fine definition of group, right? That's what he's saying there. So the term group therapy was coined in 1931 by Frank Parsons, the father of guidance, Jacob Marino, the father of psychodrama, E.G. Williamson, associated with the Minnesota Viewpoint, or Fritz Perls, the father of Gestalt. Okay. I really don't know the answer to that one. B, this dude right here. Jacob Marino was the father, coined the word group theory. Okay. Now, all those other names are kind of familiar, so let's go through this. That's the thing, right?
That was the only one that was
Not familiar. And also, he's real big in career. Okay. So, I was maybe leaning that way myself. Okay. So, first, although Frank Parsons did not coin the term group therapy, his work did help the stage for the practice since he relied on groups to conduct group work related to career and vocational counseling. And thus, he has indeed been considered a mover, shaker, and a serious player in the history of group therapy, of the group movement. But Jacob Marino is the correct answer because 10 years before psychiatrist Jacob Levy Marino coined the term group therapy, he noted that individuals in Vienna involved in theatrical productions, without scripts experienced a cathartic reaction which seemed to be curative. Okay, so in other words, because he was somebody who was an actor, whatever, he recognized that they bonded and all the things we learned about group just naturally. Okay, if you put them together in a frame. All right. Here's a hint. The first mutual aid self-help support group, AA, was founded in 1935 by stockbroker Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob Smith in Akron, Ohio. Membership of AA worldwide is now thought to top 2 million people. Counseling exams will sometimes refer to AA as a 12-step group, right? Because any 12-step group, because there's a lot more than just AA now. Noted psychotherapy author and scholar Raymond Cristini once referred to the early 1940s as the modern era of group work. In the 1940s, the two organizations for group therapy were created and group work became a legitimate specialty. The groups are, okay, so what we're looking for are what are the two organizations that kind of were created to specify in group work? The NASW and the NBCC. Okay. So what do we know about NBCC?
That's the board.
That's right. So it's not going to be them.
Right.
ASGW and AAS. Okay. Does either one of those sound familiar? The American Society for Group Psychotherapy and Psychodrama, the ASGPP, spawned by the work of Jacob Marino, and the American Group Psychotherapy Association, AGPA, which resulted from the effort of Samuel Slavinson in 1943, or the AACD and APA. Well, we know it's not A, because NBCC doesn't have anything to do with groups. AACD and APA, so what is APA? Now, that's one you might be familiar with.
APA is like the right on
American Psychological Association. So it's not A or D, so it's got to be B or C. Now, have you ever heard of the AAS or the ASGW? I haven't. Okay, just saying to let you know that I mean I have, but I don't know that they. Well, I think A really does, but now we know that Jacob Marino is the guy that started the whole thing.
Right.
And we know he was a psychotherapist. I mean, it had to do with drama and stuff. And then Samuel Richard Slavinson in 1943, I may not know him, but I'm going to lean towards C. Of course, we see that it's the right answer. But, so, we're going to go through this. Choice B mentions the ASGW, which is the Association for Specialists in Group Work, but that's an ACA division. Okay, it's the American Counseling Association division. And the American Counseling Association was founded before 1942. Okay. The Journal for Specialists in Group Work is a publication, if that's your specialty, that'll help you keep up with that. Right. The National Association of Social Workers, that's what NASW is, right? Was in 1955, and the American Association of Suicidology.
That's my first time hearing of it.
Yeah, me too. Mm-hmm. I mean, I knew that National Association of Social Workers, but y'all would know NBCC. Okay, so which theorist or theorists' work has been classified as a preface, can't talk today either, to the group movement? Okay, so Sigmund Freud, probably not, right? Because Sigmund Freud worked one-on-one. Jung, okay, always remember because they throw this kind of out there a lot. Jung was Freud's student,
Yeah.
okay? So, I mean, they ended up falling out, but Jung did not that either. Alfred Adler and Jesse B. Davis. Okay. I mean, maybe. I mean, if I'm just walking y'all through how to make the decision. Marshall Linehan, who created dialectical behavior therapy, originally used to deal with suicide behaviors. So do suicidal behaviors have anything much to do with group work? I mean, maybe, but not first and foremost. Okay? C is the answer. Adler and Davis. Because Jesse B. Davis, who was a high school principal in Grand Rapids, is cited as a pioneer in school guidance counseling and often as America's first school guidance counselor. Okay, so the way that I kind of remember that is because schools, and you guys know this, right, are handy. They are a great place to do group work. Because you can have them in a room, you can get more of them done than otherwise, okay? So that's one of the ways to kind of remember that. And then we already know, we've heard about, what does he say about Alfred Adler? Group, well, nothing, okay. There he is. Adler, known for his individual psychology, was actually engaging in group treatment during the 1920s at his child guidance facilities located in Vienna. Because, again, this is just one of the ways I kind of remember it, that group therapy really started getting attention based on putting children in a room together. Okay. Now, just so we don't leave her out, Marshall Linehan created dialectical behavior therapy, originally used to deal with suicidal behaviors. A room full of suicidal people is maybe not a good idea, right? That'd be another way to remember that. They may, encourage each other or share ideas about how to kill themselves more effectively, right? So that's not necessarily a good idea. So primary groups are, now this is one of those things that's kind of changed since I've been here. Primary groups, A, are preventative and attempt to ward off problems, or B, always follow a person-centered paradigm. Okay, there's another hint. Always, rarely ever an answer. If it says always or never, it's rarely ever the answer. Generally utilized for long-term psychotherapy, or always focused on the client's childhood. Okay, so with my little roll there, B and D are out. So generally utilized for long-term psychotherapy. What do you think? You ever heard that before? That it kind of goes better for long-term. Oh, praise the Lord. Right? No, not really. Long-term does not really help, okay? But primary groups are preventative and attempt to ward off problems, okay? Examinations in literature in the area of group processes will often classify groups using a model popularized by community and mental health experts such as Gerald Kaplan, who was a pioneer in the crisis intervention movement, okay? And here's the definition of the type of groups, okay? The three classifications are primary, secondary, and tertiary. A primary group stresses a healthy lifestyle or coping strategies, which can reduce the occurrence of a given difficulty, right? So primary groups, then that's AA, right? That just helps me remember that because we know that in AA, they're trying to keep themselves from drinking. Right. Secondary group, every time I look up, a primary group helps to stop a problem before it happens. A group such as a group which teaches birth control to prevent teen pregnancy would be a fine example. In a secondary group, a problem or disturbance is present, but not usually severe. The secondary group works to reduce the severity or length of a problem and generally includes aspects of prevention. Then the third group, so a group that deals with grief, right? Divorce recovery, shyness, things like that. A tertiary group deals more with individual difficulties that are now serious and long lasting. Okay. So the tertiary group would be like PHP, y'all know PHP,
Yeah.
day treatment.
That's what I work in.
Oh, that is what you're working. So that's more of a tertiary group, right? We know they're going to be in the group for a long time because they're not going to heal. Special note on graduate preparation, according to KCREP, a student should participate in a small group activity within the program for at least 10 clock hours during a given semester. Just so you know, because they will throw in things like KCREP now and then. A group is classified as secondary. So that implies that, well, we know it's not A because we just read that primary groups ward off problems. A difficulty or disturbance is present. B sounds right? 2 therapists are utilized. 2 therapists has nothing to do with secondary groups, right?
What did we say the example was of the secondary group?
A problem is present.
The problem is present with the.
That's the secondary. So the first one is we're going to work to support each other. Yeah.
Support each other.
The second one is there's a problem there, but it's not terrible.
Okay.
Right? Like grief or something that, we're going to hope to resolve. The third group is going to be more long lasting. All right. But if we go through our practice, we know it's not A because A is primary. D has nothing to do, so the first C has nothing to do with 2 therapists. And the D there, all of the above can't be right because we've already ruled one out. Okay. So this is a good example of how if you go through the ones that can't be right, then you're left with the only one that is right. Okay. When comparing a tertiary group with a primary or secondary group, so tertiary, remember PHP life, right? Serious problems going to be long lasting. The tertiary group focuses less on individual members. The tertiary group focuses more on the here and now. The tertiary group is less likely to deal with severe pathology, or the tertiary group is more likely to deal with severe pathology. Okay. So the tertiary group, if we think PHP, that's going to be, there's 3 letters. Maybe that would help. Okay. PHP has 3 letters, so that's going to be tertiary, because tertiary just means 3, right? Okay. So we know it's not 1 because focusing less on individual members is sort of part of group anyway. Right. We know it's not 2 because here and now is just a technique for group. Right? So it's not, can't be that. Less likely to deal with severe pathology can't be because the severe pathology is going to be in the primary group. I mean, the not severe pathology is going to be in the primary group, right? So you see how less likely might be tricky. Right. Okay, so there's the one. Group norms, and now we're going to get into defining things that go on with groups in general. A, exist only in encounter groups, okay? Only is also an always or never. Right? So that's probably not it. Exist only in career groups, that's not it. Are not related to group cohesiveness, maybe. Or they govern acceptable behavior and group rules, okay? So that is what group norms do, right? The group creates its own norm, and those are the rules of how you're going to behave in that group. Okay, group therapy initially flourished in the U.S. due to a shortage of individual therapists during World War II. Okay, there are a lot of things. That's just the right answer. There are a lot of things that randomly started happening because of World War II in our field. Okay, and this is one of them. Freud, I don't think ever lectured in America, but anyway, he doesn't have anything to do with group. Right? A shortage of competent career counselors. Groups are not limited to career counseling. Pressure from non-directive, I'm skipping C because we know that's the right one. Pressure from non-directive therapists pushing encounter groups. No, encounter groups came about in the 70s. Okay. But C is the right answer. Group content refers to the material discussed in a group setting. Group process refers to so analysis of the unconscious and the ego. Now, those are psychoanalytic terms, right? That's not something that we necessarily are going to be I mean, we're not gonna be doing much in a group anyway, right? It's the members that are gonna be doing. So we're not analyzing anything. The T group paradigm is actually a research or training group. That's not really relevant here. So then you're left with T, right? The manner in which discussion and transactions occur. So group, and that is correct. Group content refers to what the group is discussing. Group process refers to analyzing the communications, interactions, and transactions. That is the group leaders part. Okay. Group cohesiveness refers to forces which tend to bind the group members together. Right? An analysis of group content, a common co-leadership style, or a style of leadership. Okay, so is there anything about leadership and group cohesiveness? Because it is A, right? So cohesiveness means the things that bring us together,
Yeah.
right? But C and D can't be right because leadership styles don't have anything to do with cohesiveness, right? An analysis of group content also doesn't have anything to do with that, right? There are styles of leadership, but cohesiveness is not one of them. Some theorists feel that group therapy differs from group counseling, which is also called an interpersonal problem-solving group. Okay, so group therapy versus group counseling. So, in that, group counseling would be of a longer duration. Group therapy, also dubbed as a personality reconstruction group, would be of longer duration. Group counseling requires far more training. Group therapy addresses a less disturbed population of clients. Okay, so what do y'all think? See the answer, but what do you think? Group counseling would be of longer duration as opposed to group therapy. Not really. Really, group counseling and group therapy are sort of interchangeable in a day, okay? But group therapy, dubbed as a personality reconstructive group, would be of longer duration, okay? And really, I know that just because of this stuff in the, that little stuff right there, okay? Because he tells you, a personality reconstruction group is by definition going to take a long time, okay? Because getting people to restructure their personality is very hard.
It's so
Well, I mean, it's hard, even if they have a personality disorder. Those would be the clients that you would have the most difficulty working with, okay? So just because of that, I already know that B is right. Group counseling and group therapy. So to say that group therapy addresses a less disturbed population is not consistent with that, right? Because look at the PhD. They're going to be in there for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So less disturbed is not the same, okay? Exam hint, I do like to kind of look at the things he says in bold. In the last several years, the term psychoeducational group has replaced the term guidance group, since the term guidance group has become associated with negative practices such as an excessive advice giving. Here's another key point. In additional treatment for the words counseling and therapy are often used interchangeably. However, in the context of group work, therapy is implied when the problem is more severe. Okay. Psychotherapy groups are commonly used in inpatient psychiatric hospitals, right? Because that's what you call it when you bill it, right? It's a psychotherapy group. Most experts would agree that overall, A, structured exercises are more effective than unstructured techniques, or B, structured exercises are less effective than unstructured techniques, or C, all well-trained therapists favor structured exercises over unstructured. Okay, I'm going to mark off C right off because it says all. Right. Or D, ethical guidelines must forbid. That's probably must is probably not going to be right much too often either. Ethical guidelines must forbid unstructured techniques because they can be dangerous to the depressed or anxious client. No. Okay, there's nothing about unstructured techniques that's going to be dangerous to any particular population. So we're down to A or B. Okay, so what do you think? What's the difference between structured and unstructured?
it was,
Structure
structure
is,
is more, I say, to it, structure, like you know what you're gonna do, you know how it's gonna go, versus you coming in and you just winging it. There will be one structure.
to some degree, structured would be, you know, I know y'all probably both done the group activity sheets, right?
Yeah.
Where you give them a worksheet,
Yeah.
that's structured, okay? So unstructured means sort of that you're winging it, but you're also gonna be using your training. So which ones do y'all think would be more effective?
Structure.
Okay, what's the answer?
A.
B. Structured exercises are less effective. Yeah. Here's an excellent rule of thumb. Group exercises must correspond to the level of group development. In a beginning group, for example, exercises which build openness and trust are desirable. In the later stages, the forms of the exercises ideally switch back to critical feedback. Okay, so what that means is let's just read it. A structured group exercise is like an assignment for group members. The leader says, today we will do this or that. The benefit is that the exercise helps to speed up the group interaction and can help the group focus on a specific issue. Although structured group exercises are very popular and beneficial, they are generally not as effective as unstructured methods. Now, this is because when you are allowing the group to free speak, right, and you're the facilitator, you're doing your part, then they are going to get more out of it because they're able to be and do and say what they need to do and say, okay?
Right.
Now, at a PHP, that's more difficult because generally the level of functioning of the group members is going to be a little bit lower. Right? So that's why in that kind of a group, structured exercises are likely better than unstructured, okay? But typically, unstructured is better in groups.
I guess too, because in unstructured exercise, the council seems to be more empathetic with the client, and the client can reach out more. Like I had to tell the council, you know, like be empathetic with one of my, you know, because the first thing was the council is too what's the word she used? And two said, but she said too. John is like she didn't feel like she was listening to her, like she was caring. She was hearing what she was saying. So I told her, I said, now the next time you do the session, I say just be calm with her, like you really listening to her, like just a comfortable setting, and then you can go out of it.
And that's just generally true, right?
We actually had to pull outside sources. They had a church event the night before, and parents took their kids to school, which had literally shut down. Like our high school kind of was like at a standstill that whole day, to where they had to outsource because the kids were sad, teachers were sad,
Yeah, that's the kid that got shot.
Yeah. And I taught the one that did shooting his 8th grade year, and he lost his mom, like a mom. So it's like when he lost her, he kind of just started going down a different family.
Yeah. Somebody could have helped him. So, but you can't help if they won't let you, or if you don't, if you're not asked. Right. Exactly. You can't if they're not going to buy in. One advantage of group work is that a counselor can see more clients in a given period of time. One disadvantage is that a counselor can be too focused on group processes. And so what would you just naturally think would be the result of you be focusing on the group as a whole?
If you got a group, the majority, they probably all have the same problem.
Well, if you put it together right, they would, yeah.
So that would be an advantage.
That's an advantage, but what's a disadvantage?
A disadvantage, if everybody has different problems, and you gotta try to,
you can't get to the individual.
Yeah.
And that's the answer. Okay. The individual issues are not properly examined, right? That's the answer. Because if you're focusing on the group processes, then what you're focusing on is whether or not they bonded, whether or not they're doing norms, and you're not paying attention to each individual, much like the example you just gave.
Mhm.
That's probably what was going on.
Right.
According to the risky shift phenomenon, a group decision will, what weight does a group decision have? So a group decision will be less conservative. This always confuses me, because to be less conservative, so that means more risky than the average group member's decision prior to the group discussion, will be more conservative than the average group member's decision prior to the group discussion, will often be aggressive or illegal, or will often violate the group's confidentiality norms. Okay, so which ones do you think it's most likely going to be A or B? Because those are the opposites, right? Because often aggressive or illegal is not really anything that we would normally think of in relation to a group, right?
Mhm.
So violate the group's confidentiality norms. Have y'all ever heard of confidentiality norms?
It's kind of hard in a group with the group, because you tell them this, but then you don't know if the group, especially when I'm talking to my younger adults, my high schoolers, and you tell them, okay, everything we discussed in here is confidential, and sometimes they still go out and say, well,
Right, because I promise that I'm going to keep it confidential. I can't
you
promise
promise everybody
that
there,
y'all will.
right?
Right. And that's not really, so confidentiality norms within a group, really, there isn't such a thing.
Right.
So it's got to be A or B anyway. So that's the risky shift phenomenon. So does the group take more of a risk before they discuss something, or more of a risk after they discuss something?
There's more risk after they discuss.
It's the opposite. Okay, so here's his explanation.
Okay.
Perhaps what I'm about to suggest is a bit scary to think, but bear with me anyway. Think back for a moment to when you were a teenager. Okay. For the most part, your decisions and behavior were probably fairly rational, right? Fairly conservative. Now think about your behavior when you got together with a bunch of your friends, say for a party or a night out on the town. Wouldn't you have to admit that the group's decisions and behavior were less conservative, so more risky, as your views prior to the group interaction? Right? So if you're with your high school friends, are they not going to be, are y'all all together
Right.
going to be more likely to go out and do something stupid?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with a group.
Okay.
You're going to be more likely to do something stupid before you discuss it. Right? So if that comes up, kind of cross out conservative, but risky. Right?
Mhm.
Because conservative in our world means so many other different things. Okay. But cross out conservative, but risky. T groups often stress ways employees can express themselves in an effective manner. T stands for training. Okay, that's all it means. A T group is a training group. Bless you. Sometimes T groups can also have something to do with research, but in the group setting, T groups mean training. A counselor suggests that her client join an assertiveness training group. Most assertiveness training groups are unstructured, psychodynamic or person-centered, focus heavily on existential concerns, or behavioristic and highly structured. Okay, so for one thing, we know that a training group is going to be structured, because a training group means someone will be teaching you something. Okay, so it can't be A.
Yeah.
Now, be there, psychodynamic or person-centered. Are psychodynamic and person-centered the same thing? No, not at all. They're about as different as they could be. So it can't be B, right? C, focused heavily on existential concerns. No, because existentialism is a type of therapy. I mean, I think sorry, a theory, but it's also a philosophy. So assertiveness has nothing to do with that. So then we're left with, D, behavioristic and highly structured. Okay, because just think about an assertiveness training group is going to teach the people, the members, how to be more assertive. Okay. What type of group would you think Weight Watchers is? A T group, also called a training group, a self-help or support group as in AA, psychotherapy group, or marathon group. Okay.
B.
Yeah, like I say, the Weight Watchers, they kind of come together, try to help each other lose weight and stay on focus.
And that's kind of their whole point of being together, right?
Yeah.
Is if we support each other, we'll get better.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's right. I don't know if it's, but most self-help groups, I'm just going to start there and review a little bit of this answer. Most self-help groups are voluntary and make an excellent adjunct to professional counseling. Many of these groups follow the 12 steps in Alcoholics Anonymous and therefore referred to as 12-step groups. But what is 13th step? Okay. Excuse me. 13th, in AA, that means that certain members, that established members in AA and other 12-step groups sometimes exploit new members for sexual purposes. Okay? So if anything, I just so seriously doubt that you're going to have anything about 13-step, but it is a good thing to know. Because if you're referring a client to an AA group and you hear that they are doing 13 steps, then that's not a good group. The ACA and the ASGW division recommended screening for potential group members for all groups. Only when the group is in a hospital setting, only when the group is composed of minors, or only if the group deals with chemical dependence. Okay? It's got to be A, right? Because none of those others. And also, it says only, right? But we know just from our own experience that doesn't work. That's not the way it's supposed to do. Right? Because, like PHP, they're screened to some degree. Okay, a counselor is conducting a screening for clients who wish to participate in a counseling group, which will meet Tuesday nights at his private practice office. Which client would most likely be the poorest choice? Okay. A shy librarian, an anxious salesman with no group experience, an extremely hostile and belligerent construction worker, or a student with 16 hours toward her ME, Master's of Education in Counseling. Okay, who would be the worst?
See? Because he in his private office, you don't want to be nowhere by yourself in someone that's hostile.
Yeah, and you don't want to put a hostile person in a group either.
Right.
Right? So C is the answer. Right? And the shy librarian, that she's probably a good person because we want to help her learn something new, right? And anxious, having no group experience means nothing. They're usually a good group member too, honestly. And having 16 hours towards her master's degree also has nothing to do with anything. A counselor is screening clients for a new group at the College Counseling Center. Which client would most likely be the poorest choice for a group member? Okay, so we're looking at College Counseling Center. Who would be a poor person? First year student who was suicidal and sociopathic? Yeah. Okay, right off the top, because suicidal people they don't often do good in groups because they're going to be more sensitive to rejection. So you might make it worse on them. And sociopathic is somebody that has a little empathy. Okay, so that's not going to be good either. The rest of these will be good. A screening for group members can be done in a group or private. Although private screening interviews are not as cost effective or as time efficient as group screening, many group leaders feel that private screening sessions are superior. Okay? because they intensify transference,
Mhm.
because they encourage catharsis, because they intensify aberrant action, or in terms of counselor-client interaction. So what do you think? It's gonna be.
Because, I guess you're trying to see the council client interaction because you are trying to see how they're gonna act before they're gonna get in session.
And intensifying transfers is not a good thing.
No, encouraging.
And catharsis is generally going to be something we're going to get out of the group. So that wouldn't have anything to, I mean, you wouldn't want to encourage catharsis before you even start the group, right? And ab reaction is a negative reaction. So D is the answer. Most experts in the field of group counseling would agree that the most important trait for group members is the ability to open up, to listen, to trust, or to convey empathy. Okay. You can listen and or open up without trusting, right? You can convey empathy without trusting, but you're not going to get much out of the group without developing trust. Research indicates that high denial, low motivation, and low intelligence are associated with pre-termination from group therapy. Okay. Well, so Yalom, who is considered one of the experts, thinks that trust is the whole goal, right? That if people can learn how to trust, already you've helped. Groups can be open or closed. The two differ in that closed groups allow no new members after the group begins, right? So a PHP group is an open group,
Right.
right? So that, because you have some experience there, that may help you remember, right? Even though we tend to all know that, but that's just one way to kind of cement it, right? One major advantage of a closed group versus an open group is cost effectiveness. That's actually a disadvantage of a closed group, right? Because once the group is closed, you're not going to get any more money from,
Right.
That's going to be the end of that. It promotes cohesiveness. It does do that, doesn't it?
Mhm.
It lessens counselor burnout. That doesn't have anything to do with burnout.
Right.
Or it allows the members to meet less frequently. That also has nothing to do with anything. Right? The amount of time that you meet with a group is different from group to group. So the answer is it promotes cohesiveness and therefore trust and all of that other stuff.
You said it's together, right?
Hmm.
You said cohesiveness, like on the other question, you said it was together, bringing it together.
Yeah, they gonna, by them seeing each other often, they gonna like, you gonna trust them, you gonna get to know each other, you gonna learn more about each other on a daily
Yeah.
basis.
And you're going to be able to rely on each other,
Right.
and all of that. PHPs, sometimes you start to see the patients helping each other out,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
One major disadvantage of a closed group is that if everybody quits, you won't have any members.
That guy's gonna be the answer.
And it is the answer, right? If everybody quits,
You won't have a group.
then you're not going to have anybody. And so that is a disadvantage. Like if you try to do a group in the general population, those are hard and they don't work very often because of that, right? If you can't get it going, you can't get them into that motion, it's over. The number of people in an open group, do you think that's more stable than a closed group? Smaller after an extended period of time, significantly larger than in a closed group, or more dependent on the group leader's marketing skills than in a closed group. So what do you think? So is an open group more stable, the number of people in an open group more stable than in a closed group? Smaller? So does the amount of time that the group goes on have anything to do with the number of people in it? Significantly larger than a closed group, open or closed? Does open mean it's going to be larger? Not really. More dependent on the group's leaders' marketing skills than in a closed group. That would probably be number two. Number one is more stable. Okay. Because he's saying that, let's see why he says. He always says, Yes, he says this is the type of question you might quibble with, but it would be mighty difficult to defend any answer except choice A. While yes, I agree that some of the literature uses the term stability to describe the membership in a closed group, the stability, of course, comes from the policy of not allowing new members. If you read this particular question very, very carefully, it speaks of the number of people in an open group. Remember the hypothetical situation, discuss it when we read that. You have a closed group of 6 members, and 6 members leave the group. You are left without anybody. I'd hardly call that stability, would you? Okay.
Right.
So this question is asking you to choose a group strategy, open and closed, which would keep the number of 6 members stable. And it's just true for whatever reason that open groups. So if 2 or 3 people fall out, 2 or 3 people are going to come back in. Right. And so that's why the open group. And I still say D would be the leader's skill in marketing is going to be very important in that, in an open group. One distinct disadvantage of an open group is that a member who begins after the first meeting has missed information and experience. Okay? And when I do PHP work, I see that, right?
Mhm.
Because the ones that have been longer know each other better, and the ones that are coming in are missing a whole lot of that history.
Yeah, they're just like missing a class. If you miss the class, you don't have the information. So
And
it's
the-
like when you have to go play catch up, it's harder.
Yeah, totally. Okay, I like to read his bold stuff. A word to the wise. Sometimes the context of the question is everything. Although most exam questions should relate to my usage of open and closed groups thus far, there is another possible distinction. Agency board meetings are said to be open when people who are not on the board are able to attend, and AA groups are also. On the flip side of that coin, a closed board meeting would often occur in a closed board meeting populated only by board members. The same goes for AA meetings, right? A closed meeting there just means that only alcoholics can come. In an open meeting, that means anybody can come, right? So if somebody in AA wants to bring their spouse, they can only do that to an open meeting, right? But just know that's a little bit a distinction. When a group member is speaking, it is best for the counselor to try to face the group member, to try not to face the group member, to smile while listening, or to suppress genuine emotion. Okay, well, A is obviously
Yeah,
right.
You always want to look at it eye to
Yeah.
eye. And you look at it,
And
try to keep good eye contact.
yeah, especially with the one who's listening. And suppressing genuine emotion is you need to be intentional about doing that in a group setting. Because remember, however you feel, it's however they feel. The group setting has a flexible seating arrangement in which clients are free to sit wherever they wish. In this setting, it is likely that, okay, so this is going to talk about the different races and things like that have effect in a group. So if they're free to sit wherever, it is more likely that an African-American client and a white leader would sit close together. A Latino's client and an African-American leader would sit close together. An Asian-American client and an African-American leader would sit close together. Or an Asian-American leader and an Asian-American client would sit close together.
It's obviously because you normally
is
see who you familiar
People
with.
are just drawn to what they identify with.
Right.
A group setting has a flexible seating arrangement in which clients are free to sit where they wish. Okay, just another thing there. So in that setting, it is likely that a male client in a designer suit and a female client in cutoff jeans would sit close together. A Cuban male client in a designer suit and an Asian male client in another brand of designer suit would sit close together. A white female client in a designer outfit and a white male client in a pair of old jeans and an undershirt would sit close together. Sorry. A male client in a designer suit and a female client in a jogging suit. Okay. So this is just really kind of pushing you to pay attention. Right. B. The two men in designer suits. Right.
Yeah.
And men and women are not, women are going to sit with women, men are going to, if you let them sit wherever. Okay.
Normally, though, the things that I've been to, like everybody do that, But then that's a lot of times the person, whoever's the person that's the leader of the company, like, okay, now I want you to move from the person's side, you move on the other side.
Across the room, yeah.
Right.
If you know each other, don't
Yeah.
sit together, yeah.
Right.
That's what needs to be the leader's decision, right?
Mhm.
And you should make that decision before you walk in the room, whether you're gonna let them sit wherever you're gonna assign.
Right.
Which statement made by a doctoral level counselor is illustrative of a leader's focus on process rather than product? Okay, so this is a question where you take out stuff that doesn't matter. A doctoral level counselor really doesn't matter, okay, no matter what. So that's just thrown in there to try to make you think it matters, right? And again, we're focusing on process. So what are examples of a leader who's focusing on process? Jim seems more relaxed today. Sally seems a bit self-critical this evening. I hear a lot of sadness in Betty's voice, or you wince whenever Jane raises her voice. So now what's the difference between A, B, and C and D? Because D is the correct answer. Did you see what the difference is? Yeah, we can take a break.
AB.
I could go to the bathroom. Okay. So A, B, and C are all focused on individuals.
Okay.
But D is focused on the connection between two people. So you, whoever you is, wince whenever she raises her voice.
Yeah, and then to tell you, even with Medicare, they always look for measurable terms. So like even when because I work with BHU too. So when you write a notice, I have to sign off because at 10 first I'm certified. I always had to put, Jane was attentive as evidenced by her eye contact and the smile on her face. Those gestures to let them know that okay, this is how she was attentive because when they come into your child audits and look for a picture of the
Trying to
client.
figure out what
It's like the note process. It's not the same as it used to be. They
Right.
want you to actually
Right.
say to know how do you know that the client
Was
is
doing
intended
that.
doing this.
Yeah,
So
That's
okay.
right. That's right. Okay. Which statement made by a group leader in a residential center for adolescents focuses on product rather than process? Okay. Group leader in a residential center for adolescents focuses on product rather than process. Ken has not stolen for a week and thus is eligible for supplementary tokens. Karen looks down when Bill discusses relationships. It sounds like there's a deep sense of hurt, or, oh, so you fold your arms and sort of close up when Carrie mentions the angry side of your personality. Okay, so what we're kind of asking there is what's the difference between product and process? The process represents what's going on between the individual group members, right? How they're working together. And product means the as evidence, right? So that means it's got to be A, right? Ken has not stolen for a week. So that means we're looking at something concrete that's happening or that the group member's doing that's not within the group. Okay. Groups promote the concept of universality, which suggests that we are unique and so are our problems. Okay, universality does not, this would be more individuality. Universality means everybody has the same kind of experience.
Okay, universality is everybody.
Mm-hmm. B, there is a universal way to solve near all difficulty. Well, you already know that, right? Just common sense. There's more than one way to skin a cat.
Right.
A and B, those are not, A and B, those are not generally going to be an answer.
Right.
Right.
The answer is normally there.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
And D, we are not the only ones in the world with a given problem. That's universality, right? That there are other people that may have similar or the exact same kind of problem as you. And if we work together, then we're going to help everybody get better. In the late 1930s, researchers identified 3 basic leadership styles. Okay, so now we kind of moved into another topic within groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
Directive, non-directive, and semi-passive. Autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire. Relaxed, anxious, and tense. or assertive, non-assertive, and aggressive. Okay.
Or maybe
B, autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire.
And I remember they did have something in regards to that.
And that is it, right? Because
It's big, yeah.
the research, I mean, the 3 leadership styles are not unique to just group therapy,
Right.
okay? And those are them, right? Leaders, whether you're talking about a teacher or a president of a business
Right.
or whatever, okay? When I'm looking at these, I don't like to look at when he does this part. On rare occasions, your exam might mention,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
So it's
Because that's just gonna confuse you,
right.
right? When you've got it down cold,
Mm-hmm.
then you can do that, right? But get it down cold first. That's my thing on that. When the autocratic or authoritarian leader may give orders to the group, okay, while the laissez-faire leader, A, assigns a group member as the authoritarian, has a hands-off policy and participates very little with the group basically taking responsibility for itself. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, cause that's like laid back.
Mhm.
And like, I mean, lay, that's like kind of like.
Oh, very good. Laid back, laissez-faire, yeah. Let them
I kind of
take it.
take it.
And that is, well, different groups require different types of leaders, okay? So it's not altogether the best kind.
Mhm.
When comparing the autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire styles, the democratic or facilitator is the most desirable, okay? So the laissez-faire, the reason that's not the most desirable is because the laid back can sometimes be too laid back, right? And the other one, the autocratic, is like, me telling you what to do, and that's not good. But the democratic is me recognizing everybody's way and do what's best for the whole group, right? And that's a facilitator's job, really, is to make sure no one group member is being ignored, pushed on, made fun of, any of that, okay? So here is every test taker's nightmare. The question is vague. It decidedly does not delineate this specific group situation, and that's what I just said, right? The leadership style really depends on the group. However, the best way to answer this question is to think in terms of the majority of situations, right? So generally, again, the democratic style is not the most effective in every case. However, it lends itself to more situations than the other 2, right? So that's all. That's just him talking you through how to, if the question is vague, how to come up with a good answer. A group with more than one leader is said to utilize co-leaders. Co-leadership is desirable because leaders can process their feelings between sessions, and that's it, okay, period, right? That between the 2 of you, if there's something that you can't deal with or, triggers you or whatever, the other one's going to take care of it. It's also good for you to be able to focus on one individual while the other is watching how the group's responding. Okay. Co-leadership reduces burnout and helps ensure safety, increases burnout, has no impact on burnout, should not be used for open groups. Okay, so B, C, and D, they're already out, right? It's not going to increase it. It's certainly going to help it. It's not going to, and it's certainly going to have an impact on it. Okay, and whether it's an open or closed group, doesn't matter. Co-leadership is helpful when one leader is experiencing countertransference. Okay, I didn't know that was the next question, but I just gave you the answer, right? Because countertransference is going to be what happens if you are triggered. Okay, that's another word for countertransference, right? It's something that triggers something in you. All right. Co-leadership is also referred to as co-facilitation. Okay, it can be a disadvantage when leaders are working against each other. Okay, that's certainly possible. Mm-hmm. Leaders are intimate with one another. Oh goodness, yes, that's not going to be good. So husbands and wives, it's not really a good idea, right? Because they have so much history with each other, it's going to interfere with the group creating that history. Leaders question each other's competence. Certainly, that's not okay either, right? Mm-hmm. So this is one of those exceptions of me saying all of the above. okay? And I want to point that out because if you see clearly that all of those things are right, then all of the above is the answer. Co-leaders are apt to work at cross purposes when they do not meet between group sessions. They do meet between group sessions. They are master's level practitioners. They are doctoral level practitioners. Where C and D has nothing to do with anything, okay?
Right.
Group leadership is much more, it's your experience that helps, okay? When they do not meet, they tend to be at cross purposes. Well, I wouldn't even say tend to be, but that's when that's gonna happen. If they're meeting between sessions, they're talking about what's going on, they're talking about where they're going, right? And so they're not gonna be at cross purposes.
Right, that's why I did it in the treatment team, like in the.
Exactly.
When you do your treatment team meetings, so you can know what everybody's working on, social work, nursing, and keep everybody so they can be cohesive.
Yeah, exactly. Co-leaders are apt to work out Gerald Corey, who is a big mover and shaker in group, has also written extensively on group therapy, believes what is necessary for an effective group, okay? When it says the word necessary, that kind of means, what do you have to have,
Right.
okay? A master's degree in guidance and counseling, a doctorate degree in counselor education, participation in a therapeutic group, and participation in a leaders group, even if you're well educated, licensed, and certified, are 3 credit hours in a graduate course in group therapy, all right? So do you think that they have to have, right? So when it says necessary, think have to have a master's degree in counseling. Do they have to have a doctorate in counselor education? No, because both of y'all,
I have a doctorate.
oh, okay,
I got my doctorate in C.
but it's not counselor education. It's a
Professional
doctorate of
counselor.
professional counseling, right?
Mhm.
So, but I mean,
Right.
were you doing groups before you had that?
Mm-hmm.
So then do you have to have?
No, you don't have to.
No, you don't have to. Participation in a therapeutic group and participation in a leaders group, maybe, right?
Mm-hmm.
3 credit hours in a graduate course in group
Right.
therapy, no.
You
So
don't have to be C.
C is it. Most experts would agree that an effective adult counseling group has how many members? So what's the ideal number for adult counseling groups? An ideal group would have about 8. Okay, so D is the answer. Because 9 to 12, 12 is too many
Yeah. Way too many.
Oh, those anyway.
for adults. And also for kids, right? Kids should be less. We just don't do it that way because we don't usually have, we gotta have one.
Mm-hmm.
Most experts would agree that an effective counseling group for children has less members than an adult group.
Yeah.
Again, we don't do it because we can't. We got too many and not enough counselors, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So we don't. We're usually not able to do that. Although the length of group counseling sessions will vary, most experts would agree that how many is plenty of time even when critical issues are being discussed. Okay, so the amount of time you're there every time. So ideally, is it 3 hours, 1 hour, 6 hours, or 2 hours? Okay, it's not gonna be 6, okay? And generally a group should last more than 1, okay? But 3 hours is too long. So 2, right? 1.5 is usually what we do in adult group settings.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is a place where psycho PHP is different. You see how it's different? Because y'all are meeting 5 times a week,
Mm-hmm.
and you really meet your psychotherapy groups. There's 2 of them, so you really are doing
Right.
2 hours a day. They're just not usually back to back.
Right.
Okay, so in terms, the other thing also is keep in mind that your PHP people, if you remember your own personal experience in the field, sometimes that'll help you get the answer, okay? So in a PHP group, they're gonna be less functioning than the general population,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that means you need to be more directive.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not directive and you got 8 adults in a room,
Right.
to let everybody have a minute or 2 to say something, it's gonna take more than an hour,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, in terms of group risks, an ethical leader will discuss them during the initial session with the client. and ethical leaders should never discuss risks. Okay, we know it can't be big. Research has demonstrated that the less said about risk, the better. That can't be right. And an ethical leader allows the group to discover risks and work through them at their own pace. That can't be right.
Hey, so that's
gotta be that.
hey, because that's when you turn risk, they sign their confidentiality, they do all they do in the first, you do that in the first session.
Yeah,
So,
and even if you don't give them a written thing to sign,
mhm.
you
It need to
still,
be discussed.
you
but-
need to bring it up. And so B, C, and D can't be because none of those do that. And adept group leader, so that just means a good group leader, will attempt to safeguard clients against risks. Well, yeah. Will work to reduce risks and dangers. Well, yeah. So already, you see, those A and B are things you're expected to do,
Mhm.
right? Let the group handle the dangers on their own, can't be. So this is another one of those cases where A and B is right.
Yeah.
But right, just in trying to figure out, if you knock it down to A and B and try to figure one of those out, you wouldn't be able to, right?
Mhm.
Because really A and B say the same thing. A group participant wants to drop out of a group. Since the group is closed, most experts would agree that the client is allowed to withdraw. I mean, you can't make somebody stay if they don't want to stay.
Right.
During the initial session of a group, the leader explains that no smoking and no cursing will be permitted. Okay, this is known as setting ground rules. Okay, and you see none of those other answers even come close. Yeah, that don't fit. Group norms. Okay, so group norms we're trying to define now. A statistically normal group. Do statistics have anything to do with groups?
No.
So A or B.
Is wrong.
A normal group with no cultural differences. No cultural differences. We ideally want to have cultural differences in a group so they can learn from each other, right? The range of acceptable behavior within the group. So again, only one you're left with. The study of group operations is often called group desensitization. No. The hot seat technique, that's a Gestalt seat. That's a Gestalt, doesn't have anything to do with groups. Group dynamics, I mean, it can be, but it doesn't, it's not specifically group related. Or structuring the group. Okay, so what in there sounds like studying what the group does. That's it. Group dynamics refers to the study of the interrelationships and interactions between group members. Okay. The word dynamic means the group is normal, always changing, static, or defined in an operational manner. Okay, so this is one of those things that if it were me, I would sometimes confuse myself because I would be saying, well, I don't know. Because they should be dynamic, because that normal, it would be dynamic. Okay, see where I'm going there? But normal, there's no such thing as normal group. Because the group is going to, I mean, it doesn't mean that they're abnormal. It just means that each group is going to be unique to itself. Okay, so there's no such thing really. Always changing? Yes, they're always going to be changing. Static means not changing, and defined in an operational manner has nothing to do with anything. Okay, because operationally define something means that you demonstrate the concept, the concrete steps necessary to do it. Okay, that's what operational means. So dynamic has nothing to do with that. Experts firmly believe that a common weakness in many groups is D, which we can't see there. Can you see it in your group, in your book? See up here, they left D out,
What question is 450?
455.
A lack of goal setting.
It's on C.
D's the answer.
It's on C. In the end of C.
Oh, it sure is. There it is.
Yep.
Thank you. I've never noticed that many times I've done that. Ah!
The lack of goal setting.
Stop it. Okay, so, but that is the answer, right?
Yeah.
That you don't define your goals. I mean, yeah, you don't have them. A group leader who utilizes an abundance of group exercises is running a structured group. Remember, structure means that you are directing what they do.
Right.
Some theorists object to the word unstructured in group work because a group cannot not have structure, and that's true.
Right.
But it's unstructured and structured and unstructured is talking really more about whether or not you're going to give them something to do and direct what they're doing, or whether or not you're going to kind of let the group decide that. Some research indicates that structured exercises in the initial stages of the group can help. And I've been able to have like adult or even older teenage groups. I don't do that, right? Because that helps them kind of get together. In some literature group, cohesiveness or we-ness, okay, is known as group unity. Right? None of the rest of those make any sense, do they? Right? Group cohesiveness is known as group unity. Group members assume roles within a group. So now we're thinking about the roles that group members play. So which of the following of these is not, okay, a group role? The energizer, the scapegoat, the gatekeeper, or the reactive schizophrenic? Okay, well, number one, just because of language, that should say schizophrenic instead of, it doesn't fit, you know. And that's it for sure, right? You're not going to have a schizophrenic in any sort of group other than a very structured PHP hospital setting type of group, because schizophrenics don't really do well. A group member who insists on asking other members inappropriate questions is called a peeping Tom or an interrogator. Right? You see how that just makes sense? That's what that
So if
means.
you interrogate somebody, you ask them.
You're asking them questions. The following goes along with whatever the rest of the group thinks. The follower goes along with whatever the rest of the group thinks. From a personality standpoint, the follower is non-assertive, right? That's exactly what non-assertive is. It's certainly not aggressive, and it's certainly the opposite of assertive. So there you go. It's deep. The fill in the blank may secretly wish that he or she was running the group. The follower, no, we've already decided that, right?
You don't want, it'll be gatekeepers, you want somebody isolated next to you, is not gonna want to, because they ain't gonna want to say nothing.
That's
They're
right.
gonna be isolated. I don't know what harmonizer.
I'm not sure. Choice D introduces the harmonizer role, and some bills and exams call that the conciliator, right? Or the person who is the peacekeeper.
Oh, the harmony,
that makes
okay, that makes
everything
sense, the
keep-
harmony, trying to
yeah.
make things, okay.
When I was learning, they did call it peacekeeper, so that's why I'm always gonna go back to that.
Yeah.
Everybody picks on the gatekeeper, the harmonizer or conciliator, the scapegoat or the scapegoat, absolutely. A female group member is obviously not participating. A group member playing the fill in the blank is most likely to mention that and urge them to participate. The gatekeeper, okay? Because that's the person, remember, who wants to be the leader. Right, so they're gonna take that role on that. Cohesiveness or group unity is, of course, desirable. It promotes bonding and a sense of we-ness between group members. When cohesiveness is strong, nevertheless, it can also be negative, as it can stunt creativity, it can boost conformity, A and B, or it can cause the group to split into factions. Okay. So it's got to be A and B, right? Because the group cohesiveness can sometimes be a pressure to make everybody conform, right? And conformity is the thing that stunts creativity, right? So that means that everybody doesn't feel safe in answering it the way they really want to answer it. They got to make everybody else in the group happy. Splitting into factions, a good group leader's not going to let that happen anyway. In a healthy group, the members assume a role and never change it, have no roles, are flexible and can change roles, or spend a great deal of time.
Probably flexible.
Yes, flexible is always going to be desirable, but absolutely, right? If you think about your PHP groups, right? Some days,
Flexible, so if, you get a person that kind of hard nosed and don't want to change, it's kind of hard for the, for the group to flow smoothly.
Yeah, and that's right. In a group, task roles help solve problems, aid in terms of goal setting, and keep the group focused, are seen as positive, and are all of the above. See, you just did this in this one chapter to make everybody say, but that's all, again, all of the above, A and B, never, always, only, generally not, okay? But the task roles, well, group specialists classify member roles as task roles, which means maintenance roles and self-serving roles, okay? The distinctions are actually fairly easy to remember. In everyday life, when we refer to a task, we mean a job, right? Something needs to be done. A task role, an example would be an information giver or a clarifier, simply helps the group carry out a task. A maintenance role, the follower mentioned earlier, or an encourager, helps maintain or even strengthen group processes. The final category there, the self-serving role, is the negative one, right? A person who falls into this category meets his or her own individual needs at the expense of the group. A person who downright refuses to participate, or a person who criticizes or disagrees with others, would be a prime example. An entire group could be classified as a task group or perhaps a task work group. A group of this nature focuses on accomplishing work goals. Sam Gladding, who really is known nationwide for group stuff, he says that an athletic team would fall into this category, as would a quality circle employee run group attempting to improve a business, right? So anytime an entire group could be classified as a task group if their goal is to get something done, right? Maintenance roles, like task roles, are positive since such roles help maintain the group, right? So a maintenance role is the one that just keeps everything moving, right? And that's a positive one, positive role in a group. Self-serving or individual roles are negative in as much as B and C, they work against the group, right? You'd see that A would have to be not right. Democratic, self-serving, those things don't go together, right? They work against the group, they do work against the group, and they serve the individual and not the group. That's the very definition of it, so it would have to be B and C. Although task roles and maintenance roles are positive, the group can suffer if the group is not flexible and remains in one of the other roles too long, because an effective group needs some self-serving roles. If a group gets stuck in a task role, interaction suffers. Or if a group gets stuck in maintenance roles, little work or tasks will be accomplished. Okay, so we got to decide if B and C is an option. So, but we do know that A can't be, right?
Yeah.
An effective group doesn't need self-serving roles. So now we got to decide if it's both B and C. If a group gets stuck in task roles, interaction suffers. That's true, right? If a group gets stuck in maintenance roles, little work gets done.
And they get stuck. That mean they're not flexible.
That's right.
So that's how you got stuck,
Right.
not flexible. So
Yeah. So this is another one where it's got to be B and C. Group specialists define role conflict as a tension between two group members who have assumed different roles. Okay, so remember, role conflict is the role is going to be about the individual member. So role conflict is going to be between the individual member, between himself, him or herself. B, a situation in which there's a discrepancy between the way a member is expected to behave and the way he or she actually behaves. Tension between the group leader and a group member. Members criticizing other members between group sessions. Okay, none of those are role conflict except for B, right? Because a role conflict
is individual. These are all talking about group.
That's right.
Okay.
A major group dynamic is group development. This is usually expressed in terms of theories of group stages, period. Right? Because the number of hours of group conflict means nothing. Theories of group stages is the answer. The Rosenthal effect, that's the dude that wrote this book. It has nothing to do. And then the Hawthorne effect. also has nothing to do. Here's a very helpful hint. Do not, I repeat, do not attempt to memorize every single group stage theory ever invented. First, because you have better things to do with your time. And second, because there are far too many. There are. Okay. So Irvin Yalom, who is a famous existentialist therapist and a pioneer in the group movement, suggests 4 group stages: orientation, conflict, cohesion, and termination. In 1977, Tuckman and Jensen reviewed 25 years of research and came up with 5 stages: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Which stage is Tuckman and Jensen's paradigm? Which stage in Tuckman and Jensen's paradigm is similar to Yalom's orientation stage? Okay, which one sounds like? Orientating, does that sound more like forming, more like storming, more like norming, or more like performing? Forming and orientation, right? Those are kind of the same.
Because then you orient, that's in the beginning stage.
Right.
So if you forming something, you forming your groups of what you want to do.
Yeah.
With orientation.
All right. The final stage suggested by theories of group stages generally deals with the issue of separation and termination. Okay, so that's what you're going to do at the end. The initial group stage has been called forming, orientation, or the pre-affiliation stage. This stage, so what does a beginning group look like? Avoidance conflicts, a tendency for members to compete with the leader for power, approach avoidance behavior, members working on the interpretation of unconscious behavior. Okay, so it can't be deep, right? Because unconscious behavior is not going to be something we start out on, right? Avoidance conflicts means, okay, he's being redundant with the words in my questions and answers, but this will help you become more accustomed to the lingo of group work. And I've got this uncanny suspicion that it's working. In the first stage, people want to be accepted, but they are scared to participate, right? Because everybody wants to be accepted. Now, choice A. Well, avoidance conflict exists when you have 2 alternatives which are both unattractive, such as when your boss says you can either take a pay cut or lose your job. The approach avoidance situation taking place in the initial group stage is a conflict wherein you are attracted and repelled by the same goal. Okay? You want to meet group members, but it's scary to think about the fact that they might reject you. So you want to approach it, but you're also scared. So that's C. A client would generally feel the most suspicious of others in, okay, so when is the trust between members going to be the very least? The final stage of separation or termination?
You're
No,
gonna know your people then.
that's right. The intimacy
So you're gonna
stage,
be you gotten closer to them.
That's right. The group formation or exploring stage, or a group with co-leadership, also known as co-facilitation. So does having 2 leaders impact whether the trust in the group? No, it doesn't, right? So it's got to be C, the group formation or an exploratory stage, which is right? So when the orienting stage, everybody's getting used to know each other. When they're starting to cohese, when they're starting to bond, that's when they're going to start being, are they out to get me? I don't trust these people. They're up to something. That's when you're most likely going to hear that. Fights between subgroups and members showing rebellion against the leader generally occurs in the control or transition stage. Right?
Yeah, so everybody wants control of the group.
Mm-hmm. So after they're over the nervousness of getting together, then they're going to start trying to take control. A hierarchy or pecking order among members occurs in the second stage, the stage of storming, known as power and control.
This is second.
That's, yeah. Yeah. Do not assume that every confrontation is an attack on your integrity as a leader, right? Remember that my golden rule is not about you, right? And if you keep that in mind, that just comes natural. Group planning occurs in the initial stage, in the stage after the transition or conflict stage, in the final stage, known as the termination stage, or before the group begins and continues throughout the life of the group. That's when planning occurs, right? So the leader is going to make plans before the stage and going to be making plans all throughout it.
Right.
The final group stage, also called the termination stage, is geared toward breaking away. Developing intimacy, you've done that already, ideally, hopefully.
Yeah.
Working through power and control issues, you've done that already.
Right. And they tell us, like, for instance, like with BHU, because you know you don't stay there like 14 days. So the day of admission begins the day of discharge.
Absolutely.
That's how they say, because especially like with term, you know, like funding and all that stuff now, we have to think on that aspect too. So the day of admission starts the day of discharge.
You're working on it all the whole time.
The whole time from day one, you working on terminating, working away.
What's we're gonna get? Mm-hmm. And a good group leader is gonna be doing that too, right?
Right.
Because you're gonna be watching to make sure you don't get them too dependent on you.
Right.
You know, you're gonna be working on all that. A group therapist is constructing a diagram to better understand the dynamics between subgroups and members. This is called, so what do we call this? Okay, is it called sculpturing? Ego state analysis? It's not going to be that, right? Ego state analysis is going to be a psychoanalytic thing, and it's not going to be a part of the group. Charting a pictorial sociogram, charting the variance, okay? Have y'all heard of any of those?
No, but I put chart with diagram, so I mark out A and B as a choice.
Yeah. And variance, what is that? That's a research term. So it's got to be C. Okay. That's kind of I've never done that. I mean, I know it exists, but let's see his definition of it. Family sculpting also is it's a family therapy technique. Okay. Well, he doesn't really define it. He's just telling you. The study of measuring person-to-person relationships regarding what members in a group think or feel is known as sociometry. In essence, sociometry is a quantitative study of relationship concerns. Okay, so that means that I would be writing all the members up and drawing lines and figuring out if they, but I've never known anybody to do that. A group leader who asks each group member to recapitulate what he or she has learned during a given session is promoting summarization. Right? The act of briefly stating what is transpired or discussed. You use that a lot in adolescent groups, right, to make sure everybody kind of heard what's going on.
Right.
And then he's just defining these other things, right? Clarification is making certain that the leader in the group truly understands what's being said. Blocking, which is the act of putting a halt to a group member's actions that might have a negative impact on other group members, like picking on certain members or whatever. Linking, which is the act of pointing out similarities between clients. So those are all just techniques that a group leader can use, right? A leader who wishes to stop inappropriate discussion should use blocking. Absolutely. Okay. When a leader attempts to relate one person's predicament to another person's predicament, it's called link. Right, exactly. Strategies that approach the group as a whole are known as vertical interventions. Okay, vertical, it goes up and down. Horizontal goes across. Cross transactions, parallel transactions are not going to connect, right? They're going to be two lines going that never meet.
Yeah.
So really the only one that makes any sense already is horizontal interventions. But let's read this one, because when working in a group setting, the leader needs to decide whether to work with a group as a whole or with individuals within the group. Okay. Of course, by now you realize how valuable memory devices are in terms of helping you remember these distinctions. Here's the one he's found valuable in this case. If you picture a group in your mind, it appears spread out horizontally. Okay. The individual is usually sitting up vertical goes up and down, right? So individual going up and down. In the case of the vertical intervention, the leader is providing individual counseling as a group work setting. Techniques which focus on group relationships, processes, tasks, and interactions are said to be horizontal. The horizontal approach is often called the interpersonal method since it focuses on interactions. Okay. Key point, you would do well to remember that interpersonal leaders favor here and now interventions, while interpersonal leaders are more likely to work on the past. Okay. Intrapersonal. Intrapersonal works on past. Interpersonal represents here and now. Okay. Strategies that focus on an individual member of the group are known as vertical, right? So horizontal is a group as a whole, vertical is one member. A group therapist must make fewer decisions than an individual therapist, make the same number of decisions as an individual therapist, modality changes for each group, or more decisions than an individual therapist. So is it going to be the same number of decisions? Probably not, right? They're asking the question, so probably not. The modality changes for each group. Okay, what that means is using a different theory, using a different approach. You're not going to change that from group to group. Okay, so it's either going to be fewer decisions or more decisions, and it's going to be more. It's going to be more because you got all these group members to think about, and the group as a whole, right? So the individual therapist is only going to have to deal with decisions made with that one person. When a counselor reads the journals in this field, it becomes evident that, so the research shows that, and that's very true. Group counseling has more research than individual counseling. That's not true. Researchers and practitioners are working very closely to provide accurate. No, that's not true. A researcher practitioner split. Okay, so that means that the people who do it and the people that research it don't see things the same. Okay, research about it is scarce. Moreover, many studies in the field of group work have not even been well controlled, right? Because mainly people are basing it on their own groups and things, and so there's not a lot of. That means everybody's kind of doing whatever comes naturally, which means there's no research. Experts predict that in the future, group leaders will be more like life skill trainers. Group leaders will become more person-centered. Group leaders will return to a psychodynamic viewpoint. Groups will lose their popularity and eventually die out. Okay. People that do groups say they're never going anywhere because they think that there's more work done there in a group. So it can't be D. Which one's C?
Life skills.
Life skills is the right one. Because person-centered, psychodynamic, both of those are theories and don't have anything specific to do with groups, right? You may be using psychoanalytic approaches, but it doesn't specifically have anything to do with groups. According to researchers, groups are effective, although researchers cannot pinpoint precisely why, right? We just did that question 2 ago, right? And that's the answer, right? A major limitation related to group work is that REBT cannot be utilized in group therapy. Okay, REBT is just a theory and approach, right? And you can use techniques of those in a group, so that can be right. It is not really cost effective. That's absolutely not true. The opposite is true. It's very cost effective. Gestalt therapy cannot be used. No, that's another theory, and you can use those techniques. A group leader can lose control and members could experience emotional harm. That is a risk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Especially when you're dealing with a lot of different personalities.
Mm-hmm. And maybe a newer,
Right.
intern kind of thing. A major advantage of group work versus individual work is that members learn to give help in addition to receiving it, and group sessions generally cost less. That's it. Okay. The leader has a less complex role. That's not true. It's more complex. The group leader nearly always possesses more training. That also is not true. Therefore, once you've got one knot, it can't be D, right? So automatically you're left down to one. Which statement best depicts a major advantage of group work? Group work usually focuses on the here and now? No, not usually. Right? It does sometimes, but not usually. Group work is always time limited? No. PHPs by definition, right? No, it's not. Group work is always superior for career counseling? No. So it's got to be D. right? So see, if you're reading through already, you know it can't be A, B, and C, then it's just gotta be D. Which of the factors is not delineated by Yalom as a curative? Okay, so curative factor means the thing that creates the situation that helps people when you're using a group approach. Altruism, universality, and existential learning. Okay, existential learning, that doesn't have, there is such a thing, but that's not something that we would say is a curative factor, okay? Manifest dream content and insight into the unconscious mind, maybe, but see, remember, not delineated. So we're looking for the opposite here. And that makes B right, because that's all psychoanalytic. I forgot we were looking for opposites. See, you got to pay attention to the opposite. Right, so you're looking for the one that doesn't align. Universality, so let me go back and re-explain. Universality there is a that's one of the things we're looking for, right? To help everybody in the group understand they're not alone. Manifest dream content, that's psychoanalytic. We're not looking for unconscious stuff in a group, right? Catharsis, cohesiveness, and installation of hope. Yalom is big on installation of hope being a big positive of group experiences. Imitative behavior and reenactment of family experiences, that is one of the things that happens in group, right? Is that a particular member will treat the other members as though they were family, and sometimes that can show you some of their negative behaviors. In terms of research and the group leader's personality, are extroverts most effective? Are introverts most effective? Are the qualities such as flexibility, enthusiasm, and common sense may be helpful to a small degree? Are the qualities such as flexibility, enthusiasm, and common sense have a tremendous positive effect? Okay, so most effective, not true.
So 495 is B.
495
495 is manifest dream content.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
B.
Mhm.
Because that's the thing. Remember, if you see the question, the thing is not.
Right.
And so it's got to be B, because that's all unconscious. So in terms of research, the group leader's personality. So what did we hear about research just a few questions back? There's not a lot out there about groups, right? So,
Basically what you know from experience.
yep. So that means it's got to be C. Okay. Because it can't be most effective. There's no research around what's the most effective.
Right.
Okay, so we can't know that. Qualities such as flexibility, enthusiasm, and common sense have a tremendous, okay, we can't know that because there's not been enough research done. So it's gotta be, may be helpful, right? So the very small degree doesn't really mean it maybe is what you're looking at, right? R.K. Kanye suggests that group intervention is intended to ferret out unconscious material, enhance rational self-talk, eliminate dysfunctional nonverbal behavior, prevent, correct, or enhance behavior. Okay. Are we trying to look anything about unconscious material in a group setting? Nope. Right? That's a psychodynamic thing, and that's not going to be it. Enhance rational self-talk. That's too specific a goal. Right? That may be something that happens, but that's not the whole overall goal. Right? Eliminate dysfunctional or nonverbal behavior. Well, we're not going to eliminate nonverbal behavior. We might, but that would have to be a goal, and we'd have to have it. That would be more of an individual thing. So it's got to be D. Prevent, correct, or enhance behavior. And of course, that's right. Right? That's what group interventions are meant to do. Prevent, correct, or enhance behavior, no matter how you do it. A group leader who wishes to assess the impact of the group ideally would have an outside observer sit in. Okay? Because you are going to be a part of the group. So you can't do it. You're not gonna ask your group members to do it. So it would have to be an outside, member. Written evaluations are gonna be influenced by the group members. Follow-up sessions, so members can share experiences. You're probably gonna do that, but that's not gonna be a way to assess the impact. Have an outside observer sit in, well, we already know that's the answer. Give each member a pre-test and a post-test. If you were doing a skills teaching kind of a group, you might, but that's not gonna be oh, well, that means we're at the end. A group member who is counseling children under 10 years of age could best enhance the treatment process by involving parents and asking them for input. That's the answer, but I agree with you. That's generally not helpful.
Right.
Keeping the parents uninvolved, that's not necessarily helpful either. Reminding the children to speak softly at all times, that has nothing to do with it. And therefore, if we know it can't be C, then we know it can't be B either, right? So that leaves us with A.
Yeah, but sometimes, because I had a situation where the child was kind of like suicidal, and talking to the child, and she was saying how the mom has a new boyfriend at home, and he, you know, how he handles and does this. And I called the parent, because I asked, I said, would you want me to do it anonymous call DHS? I asked the child, what do you want? He said, well, I want you to talk to I said, are you sure you want me to talk to mom? Because I know they can cause problems with the moms. So I ended up calling mom, and she was like, well, she's not going to run my life, and this and this. So it's kind of like a two and two when you're dealing with students or whatever. So
And in a group session, when you're dealing with kids in a group,
kids, yeah.
you know, involving the parents can sometimes be a negative
Yeah,
because
so-
the parent may say, what happened in your group today? Right. And
the kids don't
initiate.
tell it, it's more kids business getting talked about.
And maybe they will tell it, maybe they won't, but but you put the kid in the position of having to determine whether or not they're gonna tell their parent what happened,
Right.
right? And so,
And this was like an individual. That was the individual I was doing with her because of the suicide.
Well,
ideation
right.
Or whatever,
but
yeah, and so it made me concerned. I got my phone. I said, baby, you need, you know, try to get. And that's why I feel like I was telling the principal. I feel like, you know, every counselor, especially more, they need to have a phone, like a school district phone that the child can contact you 24 hours with, you know, if something's going on.
and with somebody that's suicidal, I mean, I think that would be great if they could make that happen.
Right.
But with a suicidal kid, I'd be sure to give them a 1-800 number for suicidal hotline.
Right.
And I'd be sure to find and show, I mean, I hadn't looked for any in a while, okay? But I'd be sure to have some online resources that they could go to
Okay.
that were good.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So in other words, you check it out to know whether or not it's good. And then say, if you feel like that's gonna happen while you're not here,
Mm-hmm.
do these things.
Right.
You know? And I'd go back and probably call CPS.
Right.
When an adolescent complains about his or her parents in the group, it is best to jump on the bandwagon and agree with the child.
Mhm.
No, you know that's not ever going to be
Right.
good, even if the parent sucks. Okay, it's not going to be good to say, because what's the child going to do? Going to go home and say, my counselor said
You're right.
to avoid taking sides. Okay, so that sounded good already. But to help him or her see the parent's point of view via therapeutic techniques such as role playing,
Mm-hmm.
if you can. Okay. Talk only about positive experiences. No. Immediately put the child on the hot seat. The hot seat means we're going to interrogate you, right?
Mhm.
So B's the only answer, right? And I would argue with this, help them see the parent's point of view.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm going to listen, and I am going to do that, but I'm not going to maybe necessarily say it just like that.
Right.
But that's just me. All right, so that's that chapter. So what was today like for y'all? Give me some feedback.
Today was good.
Because we got information, even though the answer was there, you broke down like why this one wouldn't be the right answer or why that one would be the correct answer. So
Good.
that was,
Good.
Yeah.
Because usually I do through a semester, and so that's what we'll do. I mean, because y'all are probably going to be more reliable at coming. So y'all think about what y'all want to do next time,
Mhm.
you know, based on that book, and that's what we'll do.
Right.
Okay.
I will, so we're gonna do-
Just
we're
let
gonna
me
do
know.
next- we're gonna-
I will. I got both of y'all.
Okay.
Oh, well, we could set a date if y'all want.
Okay.
I mean, if you're here. Because March, I could do the 5th or the 26th. Well, yeah, I'm down. one or two, the 5th or the 26th. So the first weekend in March or the very last weekend in March?
Let's do the last, I got a meeting, I'll be going to a meeting the 5th.
Okay, 26th it is.
Okay.
Okay.
The 26th.
And 9:30, we'll do the same time.
Okay.
Because if I gotta chase somebody down, open the door. You know what I'm saying? All right, good deal. I'm glad y'all made it.
Thank you, I'm very okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. I'm just glad to see both of y'all, really. I haven't seen either one of y'all in a minute.